or welcome back to my channel, Gabbing Ginger. My name is Lauren, and this is little Miss Annabelle. Yeah. And today we are going to talk about her birth story. And if you have been following along, thank you for following our pregnancy updates and our adventure to getting to meet Miss Annabelle. And if you haven't, I will make sure to link my pregnancy update videos below so you can see my tummy grow with this little girl and see all the chaos she caused during pregnancy. It really wasn't that bad. But we'll talk about her story. If you haven't, make sure to like and subscribe so you can follow along. Annabelle is baby number 2 for me. I have a almost 2.5-year-old little boy named Trip. And yeah, so this is our labor and delivery story. And I feel like I should precursor it with, and I don't know how much I talked about this in my other videos. Hopefully she's going to last. You're okay. I had a pretty fast labor with my first. So I was, as much as I could be prepared to not be able to get an epidural, to have a pretty fast labor with her. And if you didn't follow along, I was 40 weeks and 5 days pregnant when I finally went into labor with her. So I had a longer second pregnancy than a first pregnancy. But she was well worth the wait. And with that being said, let's get started. So I went to drop my oldest off at Parents' Day Out we left our house about 8 o'clock, and I was loading him up, and I noticed, I was kind of having some contractions, and I thought, oh, it's just because, loading a toddler into a car and getting out the door with a 2.5-year-old is sometimes a challenge. So I kind of was like, oh, once I sit down and drive and relax, like, they're going to go away. And I had a chiropractor appointment at 9 o'clock. So I thought, well, that'll relax me. And so I was still kind of having them. They were probably like 6 minutes apart. And they were just really bad cramps, feeling like the really deep down period cramps where, if you know what labor feels like starting, I thought, these feel like real contractions. Like, I've had contractions, but these feel like they're starting to become the real thing. Not that the ones before weren't real, but that these are closer to when things are going to get started. So I went to my chiropractor, got adjusted. She was like, you're feeling pretty loose, so that's, and if I'm saying this wrong, I'm sorry to my chiropractor, but she was great, and she was saying I was real wonky, which is a good sign that labor is imminent. So, which, we knew at that point it's imminent because I was 40 weeks and 5 days. At some point I was going to get induced. So went there, and I had a doctor's appointment at 9:45, and going there to the doctor's, I was still having contractions. They hadn't sped up. They hadn't really slowed down. So I was like, well, the doctor's office is right across the street from the hospital. I'll just go to the doctor. If I'm really in labor, then I get a skip triage. So I went in, and we were doing everything, doing the thing. My blood pressure was a little bit high. Nothing too crazy, but high for me. So we thought, well, that's a good sign. That could mean that labor really is happening. And she goes to check me, and I'm only a 3 still. But I told her, I said, I'm having these are the real deal contractions. And, both I think it was a medical assistant and her kind of saw, and we're seeing the frequency, but I said, they're not close enough together to go to the, and she's like, I'm just going to call over to L&D. We'll get you hooked up. You had a fast first labor. We can break your water and get things going. You're 40 and 5. Let's do this. And she was working that day. So yeah, okay. So I go over to labor and delivery, and I probably got to the hospital at about between 10:30 and 10:45. And we start the whole check-in process and asking all the medical questions and finally getting an IV, because to get an epidural, I had to get through, well, I didn't have to. It's, you really want to get through a bag of fluid and they have to send your blood work off. And the doctor from my doctor's office that was kind of on call, like he was over at the hospital, so he said he would break my water for Dr. English, since he was already going to be over there. And so the nurses were like, okay, let's wait for the epidural so then she doesn't have to feel you break her water. She's like, okay. At this point, it's got to be like 11:30, because we've done all our intake. I'm sitting there on the IV, all this good stuff. So he's like, I'll come back around lunchtime, and that's when we'll do it. So we're sitting there and, just getting through all this stuff. Oh, no, it's okay. And I'm like, this is so great compared to my first labor. It was very chaotic with Trip, because by the time we got through L&D, things sped up really quickly. By the time we got to, we went from triage to L&D, it was just really a little bit chaotic. So it was kind of nice. I was sitting there, just talking to everyone. I was having contractions, but so finally the anesthesiologist shows up. I get my epidural, which was much scarier to get this time, because I was having some pretty good contractions, but I wasn't having back labor, which I had with Trip, and I wasn't getting a break between contractions with Trip. So they would peak, come down, go back up. And so I felt like I couldn't breathe. There was a lot of, so when the epidural was coming with him, I was just so relieved to get any kind of pain relief. So this time around, it was actually kind of scarier because I kind of felt fine. But it was nice because when I felt a contraction, they have to get you all set up, and then I felt a contraction, and then we were ready to go. So we did it in between a contraction. So that was nice. So we get it, and we're sitting there getting adjusted. The nurse comes to check on me to make sure everything's good. And I was having a funny feeling in my leg, which I had with Trip. And she's like, oh, you must have a hot spot, so we'll kind of adjust you to make sure the epidural is like kind of going on both sides, because you tend to sometimes like feel it more on one side than the other. It's like, okay. So she shifts me, and then she leaves, and maybe 2 minutes later I had the strongest contraction, and I felt it really bad down my leg, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is making it worse. So I called her back in, and she walks in with the doctor, because at this point it's probably 12:30 or so, because by the time the epidural came in, it got set and all that. So it was probably between 12:30 and 1. And so the doctor and her both walked in at the same time, and they go to look, and my water has broken, and I get checked, and I'm a 9.5. So I had probably had my epidural maybe an hour. I think it was probably closer to 30 to 45 minutes. And so then they called my doctor to come over, and then they started setting up the room. And we started pushing at probably 2 o'clock, and I had her at 2:04. It took 3 or 4 pushes to get her out. So basically I got to the hospital at 10:30 and had her at 2:04. So pretty fast, especially considering I wasn't really hooked up to anything until probably an hour and a half in. So it was very fast. It was great. We didn't really have any complications. It was really nice. With my first, we had NICU in the room, and he had to be assessed before he could be put on me. My husband didn't cut the cord because it was around his neck. The cord was a little bit around her neck, but the doctor was able just to like push it off. So Mark got to cut the cord. And it was just the doctor and 2 nurses and my husband, and that was it. Pushed her out, and you know, we just had one-on-one time with her for probably an hour and a half. And my poor dad, he was up there with us talking and stuff. When the doctor had come in and he left the room. And then this has happened now 2 times with both of my labors, that my dad leaves the room and then it's like, sorry, we got to have a baby. So he's like, and it's very weird. My mom did not have super fast labors or easy labors. So I couldn't tell you what I did. I didn't drink raspberry leaf tea. I didn't eat dates. I didn't do any of that. I just have fast labors. I transition very fast. That's what they all say. Like, how did you go from a 3? And I did get checked probably right when I got hooked up to the epidural. The nurse checked me, and I was a 4.5 at that point. So we did know that things were moving along, but basically in 45 minutes, I went from a 4.5 to a 9.5. So it was a very good birth. I wouldn't choose to have done it any other way. I'm really lucky. I loved getting to have an epidural. I don't want to say I was scared not to have an epidural. The pain didn't scare me. I felt strong contractions. I've had back labor. It's not that. I love that I got to be relaxed, that I could just talk to my husband, that I could just talk to my dad, and I wasn't writhing in pain. And that's just my personal, journey. Now, if we have more kids, will I get to have an epidural? I don't know. It's kind of something I go into knowing I may not be able to get it, and that may not be my story that time, and that's okay. And I'm not going to be embarrassed if I'm that screaming lady that's in pain, because it's nothing to be embarrassed about. But when I, can have the choice, that's the choice I wanted to make, because it helps really relax me. And I don't know, maybe that's what helps me transition so quickly, because it helps calm me down and get where I need to go. So, and I did have some residual numbness, not for a really long time, but because when I had been complaining about my leg, and then when they had adjusted me and it hadn't worked, she gave me a little bit more epidural, thinking that it just wasn't as strong on that side. I think this is what happened. And so it took a little bit longer for the epidural to wear off on my left side. Always lags. That's how it has been with both labors. But I would say, I don't know how many hours. I mean, I got up and went to the bathroom with help. It just felt like my leg was asleep, like going to sleep. That like almost that prickly feeling. That's what it felt like. So I will stop rambling. But that is Miss Annabelle's birth story. In the blog, I will link below. I'll post some photos and stuff like that from the birth itself. And yeah, that's what I'll do. And if I talked about anything, I'll link it below. I'll link all my social media as always. And let me see if I can get a good picture. You say hi, sweet girl. That's Miss Annabelle. And she's been a really good baby. So I will definitely do some updates on like being a mom with 2 and things like that, our adjustment. But she's been really good, and we're lucky to call her ours. And I think that's it. Thank y'all for watching, and have a great day. Bye.